Hello, Year 10. Today we're going to continue on with our study of genetics and probably focus more on the process of cell division. There are two processes of cell division. One's called meiosis and the other one is called mitosis. The one we're going to focus on today is the more simpler one, which is mitosis. But all of this is around this inquiry question of how does genetic information get transferred from the parent to the child. Like I said, we'll start off with mitosis today, and in our next video we will look at meiosis. So what is mitosis? So it is a type of cell division. It is really used when we're needing to grow or repair our tissues. So what happens here is one cell splits into two. So you can see here in the image we have got one cell. You can see that it is duplicated and the cell is starting to pinch in here. It's elongating a little bit more and pinching in, and we get two cells. Now those two cells are identical to the parent cell. So this cell here is called the parent cell, and these two cells here are called the daughter cells, and they both are the same genetically as the parent cell that we have here. So mitosis is used to make more cells, to make new cells. So when we're growing, we obviously need more skin, our bones need to grow. All of those things that involve our growth is occurring due to mitosis, and this is the same process that happens when you're an embryo and that growth is happening. There is some specialization, but we're getting bigger and bigger as we become an adult. So as I said before, it's about growth and repair. So when we're growing, when we're getting bigger, like I said, we need more skin. So our skin's going to have to reproduce to make more cells to cover that growth. But mitosis also replaces our damaged cells. So every time you break a bone, you graze yourself when you fall off your skateboard, you might have a large cut. Our body is an amazing thing and can repair itself. And you think how long you're in a cast for, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the severity of your injury. And in that time, your bone has been able to knit together and repair that bone. So obviously here in the image we've got, it's a little bit of a severe break, and I'm not so sure that that one would easily be just, well, it wouldn't be left alone to set. They would have to realign it. And in some cases, if they don't think it'll stay that way, they will put a pin and plate in to help the cells. And so when the bone is reforming, they want it to sit straight. You've heard about fractures that have not been set properly and people have got a lump or whatever else because that bone wasn't in alignment. But if they can pull that bone back and have it sit and keep it still within a cast, the bones will the cells and bone cells will reproduce to heal that bone. So again, an amazing job our body does. So we've always got our cells undergoing mitosis, whether it's due to an injury, whether it's just us growing. But even once we've stopped growing, we are reproducing and producing more cells. Now, there'll be a few cells that are old, so you'll notice sometimes if you rub your arm, you'll see some skin cells fall off. They're our old cells that aren't working too well. Maybe you've damaged them through sunburn and you will lose some of those external skin cells. And so through mitosis, they're replaced. So if every time you were to rub your arm and cells were to fall off and they weren't being replaced, then we'd be down to no skin. Every time you got sunburnt, which is not good for your skin, but if every time you got sunburnt and you peeled a layer of skin off and that was never replaced, then obviously our skin is getting thinner and thinner, the layers of skin there. So we are constantly replacing those. That is that regeneration to make sure our tissues are working healthy and properly. Now, sometimes that process can go awry, and that's when we might get tumours develop where they just keep reproducing and don't switch off when enough have been regenerated, but we will talk about that one a little bit later. So when we talk about mitosis, there are certain stages, and you saw this in the earlier picture there of those cells. what is happening, and we will look at this and in a bit more detail, and it would have been mentioned in the video on DNA replication that you've been asked to view. We have our initial DNA in our cells, and you can see that we have got, say, for example, in this case, just for simplicity, we've got 2 chromosomes. They replicate, it becomes 4. Then they line up in the center, so in the middle, then they move away, and then they split into their 2 cells. So the reason we have to replicate is because if we didn't, then the new cells would only have half as much in terms of chromosomes as the original cell, and they wouldn't be identical. And so because then they're not identical, that's where we're looking more, I suppose, at our meiosis, where we've got half the amount of cells. So they're not going to be functioning as well. We need the full complement of DNA in our cells. And so when our tissues are reproducing skin tissues, we want the skin cells to be the same each time. Then when we look at our bone cells, when they reproduce, we want those cells to be the same each time. So we want the same amount of chromosomes so that the same message is being made in each of our cells. And when that happens, certain ones are switched on. So we've got all the same DNA in all our cells, but certain genes are switched on to do their purpose. So therefore, that will be different. But we do still want our DNA to be the same in all of our cells. So we replicate here. So you can see here we've got 2. We replicate it. We now have got 4. Or we have our double of this one and our double of this one. Now they line up here in the center. Now when they're lining up in the center, that is so that when the cell pinches in here, that chromosome will go to that side, and this one will come to this side. That one will go to that side, that one will go to that side, and we will get the pinching in. And then we get 2 cells that are exactly the same as the parent. Now there's a new term there called diploid. Now diploid is our full complement of DNA. It's our full number. So in humans, we have 46 chromosomes in each of our cells. So we're going to have a look at this process a little bit more, but this would have been alluded to in the video that you were asked to watch. So you can see here, before a cell divides, it has to make another copy of itself, so everything doubles up, and we get 2 identical daughter cells. Now, we have looked at in that video that you watched about something called DNA replication. And for this DNA to replicate, which is what's happening in this first step here, where I get these 2 are now becoming 4, that original DNA strand has to unzip. It unwinds. Now, they used terms like DNA helicase and DNA polymerase. They are some terms you are going to use in the Year 12 biology course, but at our level, we don't need to worry too much about that. By all means, you can use those terms. It's always great to use the meta language of science, but here it unzips. And as we've learnt before, A pairs with T, C pairs with G. So what happens is a new strand is built. Now that's done by DNA polymerase, but a new strand is built. So you can see here it has unwound, and now a new strand here is being formed where they are matching up with their complementary pairs. And then once that fully unzips, we get 2 strands here that are exactly the same. And that's what's occurring in this step here. This strand is exactly the same as this strand, and that's called our DNA replication that happens in our first step in our mitosis. And then when it halves, it becomes back down to the same amount of DNA in each cell. So have a look at the questions that I've asked you to answer. There's a worksheet attached with some of this on here, highlight. No submissions required today. Thanks very much. See you soon.